My name is Dr. Rajeev Mehta, and I welcome you to Doxarus, the Health Connection. Today, we will be talking about the COVID-19 vaccine. Our expert for this topic is Professor Sunanda Gaur from the Rutgers Robert Johnson Medical School in New Brunswick, New Jersey. She is also the director of the Robert Johnson AIDS Program, director of the Clinical Research Center, and director, South Asian Total Health Initiative. To add to that, she's also a professor in the Department of Epidemiology at the Rutgers School of Public Health and an adjunct professor at the Ernest Mario School of Pharmacy at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey in Piscataway. Welcome, Dr. Gaur. Thank you for sparing the time to be with us today, and I'm sure our viewers will appreciate the knowledge that you will impart to them.
Thank you, and good morning.
So let me begin by asking you a bunch of random questions that some were suggested by our viewers and some by friends and family. And this is the burning topic, the COVID-19 vaccine, and what can we do to protect ourselves, and how can I sort of make sure that all my loved ones are safe, and so on and so forth. So let's begin with a simple question. What is a vaccine?
That's a great question because most people really don't fully understand. So vaccines, I guess the most common vaccine most people know about is the flu vaccine because that's talked about a lot. Basically, the vaccine is a immunization, which means that you inject a small piece of an organism. Let's say it's a virus or a bacteria, and when you inject that, the body then responds to it and makes an immune response. And that immune response can be in the form of antibodies or in the form of other types of immune cells that help protect the body from the particular infection that the vaccine is against. So in the case of flu vaccine, it will protect you against the flu, against getting the flu and getting sick from flu. And so in this way, there are vaccines for many infections that have been prevalent and affecting children as well as adults over time.
Now, what is a COVID-19 vaccine? You've talked about in general about vaccines. Let's be more specific about COVID-19.
So a COVID-19 vaccine, in a similar way, is a vaccine that will protect you from getting sick and dying, actually, from COVID.
And what is in these COVID vaccines?
So there are many types of vaccines. In a general way, you can think about it as any of the vaccines have a small portion of either the virus itself, the COVID virus itself, which has been inactivated, or it's just a piece of the virus, or it could be a vaccine that's carrying the genetic material of the virus. But it's important to understand that the vaccine itself doesn't give you COVID, okay? It is, there is no live virus in it. It's only small pieces of virus or small genetic materials of the virus. And when it's injected, it produces an immune response or the antibodies to protect you from COVID. So no one can actually get COVID from getting the vaccine.
All right. So I think you've covered part of the answer to the next question. Once you inject vaccines or substance, what are you going to label them as? How do these vaccines actually work?
So different vaccine works a little bit differently, but basically, because you're injecting a part of the virus or a gene of the virus in the body, once it gets into the muscles or the body, then it enters the cells of the body, and then because it sort of in the cell's machinery, it then makes the body recognize that as a foreign substance, and then it reacts to it by making antibodies. So, in a way, when you're injecting, you are tricking the body into thinking that, oh, there's COVID inside me. And then the body makes an immune response to it. And that immune response or the antibodies stay in your system, okay? And then if you were to be faced with COVID, with some or exposed to somebody with COVID, your body would then already be armed against COVID and would either not get infected at all, or if you get infected, you don't get sick, or don't get really into the ICU and those types of things that we are hearing about COVID that can make really people very sick. But if you have those antibodies, almost like you have a shield against COVID because of the vaccines. Does that explain what you were asking?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a good answer. Now, obviously, you don't use humans to sort of create these vaccines. How exactly are these vaccines developed and tested before they actually, are put into the human body?
So all vaccines are developed. There's a process. So first step is always in the laboratory. So you're working with cells in the laboratory and seeing how the vaccine would work. The next step is animals. So the candidate vaccine or the vaccine you think will work, you first check it out in animal models. So you'll inject a model. So in the case of COVID-19 vaccines, often it's macaques or other non-human primates that are injected, and then you measure their blood to see if they've made antibodies, how protective it is, and did it have any safety problems in the animals. So once it's past the animal phase, then it goes into what is called phase 1 in humans, in which you give the vaccine to a small number of people, and the idea is to make sure it's safe. That's the first phase. It's for safety. You give it to a small number of people, you observe them very carefully, and you determine that, okay, it's not causing any adverse event. That's the only purpose of phase 1 in general. Then comes phase 2, when you expand it to a little bit larger number of people, and you continue to look for any safety problems, but you're also starting to see if in people it's producing an immune response or antibodies, and is it effective to some extent in people by measuring levels of antibody after the vaccine is given to people. And once it passes that phase, then it goes into phase 3, which is the large trial. Usually, in the case of vaccines, it's tens of thousands of people that are randomized, which means that by chance, they are given, one group is given a placebo, which is usually a saline or saltwater injection, and the other group gets the actual vaccine. And then you follow them for a period of time and see if this, number one, is their antibody being produced, and other types of immune responses are happening. And the most important, to see if it actually protects against the illness. So in this case, it's COVID-19. So phase 3s are larger. It includes a lot more people. It goes on for longer. Also, you're continuing to look for safety in large numbers of people. And then once the vaccine people have been followed on the phase 3 for a period of time, and it's then at that point during the phase 3, it's being evaluated by independent data committees that look at all of the results that are coming out. And if it looks like the vaccine is actually protective, and against the illness, in this case, COVID-19, they will then submit all of the data to the FDA. And the FDA looks at the data, and that at that point, there's a number of committee that advise the FDA. At that point, they will move to approval if it looks like it's effective as well as safe. So this whole process is a very long process, and it's followed with for any vaccine or any new drugs that are coming to humans. Many of the medications and vaccines never really go beyond phase 1 because they found something toxic, and whatever reason they were not safe. 80-90% of medications don't even go beyond phase 1. So it is a very, very carefully monitored process of making vaccines.
Good. Now, I believe, recently there was some confusion as to what dose, a certain dose was supposed to have been given and a different dose was given. How do they figure out what dose to use for a vaccine?
So the dosing is figured out in phase 1 and 2 usually, before it comes to that phase 3 where you give it to a lot of people. So phase 1, you're figuring what you do is you give the people who are participating in a phase 1 study, you give them various doses. You start with a very small, a little bit bigger, because you're really trying to figure out what dose is the safest and what dose produces the best immune response. So those doses are usually figured out in the first phase 1s and 2s. By the time anything comes to phase 3, usually you figured out what dose you want to do. Although even in phase 3, sometimes you end up using maybe 1 or 2 different doses as well, because you may want to see what happens in a large number of people with 2 dose strategies. That's done a lot in vaccines. And I know the confusion happened with the AstraZeneca vaccine, where the data is actually still not clear exactly what happened, but it appears that and usually this doesn't happen very often, so it's very surprising that this happened. But one of the dose groups was supposed to get a full dose. The other group was supposed to get full dose followed by half dose, but they reversed it. They got the half dose followed by full dose. And it was a pharmacy error, it appears, and it was discovered later after some time, after a group of people had already received that kind of dosing. We're still waiting to really hear all of the details of what happened. But what's interesting is that particular group who got the wrong dosing actually had a better immune response. So
right, half dose first.
By serendipity, they found that strategy was better, but it wasn't planned to be that way.
Well, I guess, there are always these things that are labeled as chance discoveries, and this perhaps will be one of those.
Exactly.
So, in your opinion, are these vaccines really safe?
So this has been talked a lot in the media, right? Is that, it's Operation Warp Speed, and we are making it so quickly, and, is it really going to be safe? And it's, it's a valid question because, it is rapid. I mean, if you look at how long it takes to make a vaccine, I mean, generally, you're talking about 10, 15, 20 years or longer, even in some cases. So
right.
How is it that with COVID-19, we have a vaccine in 9-10 months, I mean, not even a full year, the vaccine work began for COVID-19 somewhere in January, February, because as soon as the virus was reported from China, very quickly they got the whole genetic sequence of the virus shared with the whole world. I mean, now we have technology to do all of this so quickly. We couldn't do this several years ago, but very quickly, all the scientists around the world had the full genetic sequence of the virus. So they started working right away on the vaccines because they knew that a vaccine would be needed. So let's say it started in January, and in December now, the 15th, the thinking is we will have an approved vaccine. Is that fast? I mean, that is rapid for a vaccine.
That is really rapid now. I agree.
Yeah. But I would say that none of the steps were shortchanged. Okay. Even though it's rapid, it has been so much resources have been poured into this vaccine that what funding you would take years to get, you got it right away. And so you could do your laboratory, you could do your animal studies very quickly. Same with phase 1 and 2. There was such amount of funding that was put into this that people could really operationalize these very fast. And I'll tell you from my own experience, doing at our center here, the research center at Rutgers, we are doing the Johnson & Johnson candidate vaccine study. It's a phase 3 study. It's part of the Operation Warp Speed. And within a matter of 3 months, so we started in September, October, November, we are in December now. We have already enrolled over 500 patients. Okay.
Excellent.
I mean, I could not have dreamed that we could do it. I've been involved in many clinical trials through my career. I would never have thought that you could do such a thing. And why could we do it? Because there's been funding and a lot of support. B, there is a lot of people very interested in this and trying to discover this vaccine. There has been a lot of people that actually want to participate and become a study participant. We've been surprised. I mean, there've been thousands and thousands of people wanting to get vaccinated. So there's this whole it seems like the whole scientific community as well as the community itself have come together to make this happen. But what I would want to say is that no step has been shortchanged. It's been rapid, but every step has happened the way it should happen. And it will be reviewed by the FDA in the same way any other vaccine is reviewed. And it will be approved only if it is safe, found to be safe and effective. And I have no doubt that they will take it very seriously. I think they're safe. Personally, I would say they're very safe. I would take it, and I really, I think people really need to feel, sort of reassured that none of these all the steps that I outlined before have happened with this vaccine.
Right, well, that's good. Good to know that they didn't cut any corners. And I mean, the advances in technology over the past so many years have really helped streamline stuff, make it easier to do stuff. It's like, you have to wait in the past for a lot of stuff to happen before you could order and have stuff delivered. But now it moves along so fast that, I mean, it's mind-boggling. So that is good. Now, like if, let's say, as individuals, we go out there and get immunized against COVID-19, will it at some point in time help generate herd immunity, or will it depend on the vaccine?
So herd immunity is very important for all viral infections because, as we know, viruses need a human body to survive. They can't survive without human body. So if the virus doesn't have human bodies to infect, because the human bodies have the shield, they've developed a protection through the vaccine, the virus has nowhere to go. So you can think about it, if there are a lot of people, let's say if 100% of the people in a community have taken the vaccine and they are armed to defend, where will the virus go? It has no place to go. So what we know about, that's called herd immunity. The entire community is protected. So we don't really need 100%. We know that from other viruses that you can have 70, 80% of the community immunized and the virus will still be, you can stop the virus. Okay, so, but you do need a large proportion of the community to be immunized, because if it's only half the people, then it's continuing to infect the other half and it'll keep propagating. So the herd immunity is extremely important. So here comes the big tricky question, because there are a lot of people that don't want to take the vaccine and they don't trust that the process has been careful and safe, and that it's not been rushed through all of those things. And some people in general don't trust vaccines, for any vaccines. I mean, there are people, the flu vaccine's been around for so long, and only 60%, 70% of the people take the flu vaccine. So here comes a new vaccine. So there have been survey studies done looking at, how many people will take the vaccine once it's approved. And about 40% of the people, even 50%, depending on which community you are surveying, are saying they don't want to take the vaccine. So, I mean, that's not good news. And I think particularly, African American and Latinx, these communities that are high risk for COVID complications and death, they mistrust the vaccine. They don't want to take it. I'm going to say one more thing, our South Asian community, okay, we don't hear a lot of data about how is COVID for South Asians, because in the US, all of the data for South Asians is sort of mixed with Asians, right? Commingled with Asians. So we don't, Asians as such are not a high risk, but there are data coming out of UK, where they do separate South Asians from Asians. And they are showing that South Asians are high risk for getting sick from COVID, as well as having complications for COVID, almost as much as African American. And I'm not surprised, because look at how much diabetes is in our community. Look at how much cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance, all of these are risk factors for COVID. So I think our community needs to really be careful and, really protect themselves with this vaccine. It's important.
Some time back, there was this talk about the BCG vaccine offering some degree of protection against COVID-19, and then again, the blood type O and blood type B being rather O being the best, and B being somewhat protective. Now, is that really true, or it's all up in the air right now?
Right. So, I mean, the data for BCG vaccine actually is controversial. Still, it hasn't been fully, there've been studies showing both ways. So we don't know. Probably. So some of it started because people started to look at what's going on in India. And, even though the cases are high, mortality is not high, and as high as some other countries. So people were saying, well, that's because we have the BCG vaccine, and maybe the vaccine is protective against COVID. And there's some theoretical basis for that, because sometimes vaccine against one can produce an immune response that will protect us from another thing, another virus or bacteria. And I think then that's where it started, but the data have not borne out, that it really is protective. I believe there are some studies still going on. In fact, there's a vaccine candidate that's using BCG proteins in it to see if it'll produce an immune response. So I think the jury is out on that. And the blood group thing is also sort of very interesting. And all of the blood group data is from retrospective, looking at people who've gotten sick and seeing what their blood groups were, and seems like O is protective. but it's not quite fully figured out why it is, and is it truly happening? So there's more to come on that.
Right. So the South Asians who feel that they're relatively protected shouldn't really think of it in those terms, and so, they're equally at risk as anybody else, at least for the time being. That's how it appears.
In terms of BCG, right?
Right. Right.
Right. I would not say BCG is protective at this point.
Okay. So that brings us. Sorry.
I'm just going to say, even if you're O blood group, that doesn't mean that you can go about and not wear a mask and do all of the things to protect yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, who all can get vaccinated against COVID-19? Just about anybody, or I mean, or it's going to be done in a phased manner as and when the vaccine does become available?
Right. So yes, it will. Ultimately, everybody would need to get vaccinated. We talked about herd immunity and how important it is, but because the amount of vaccine that's available and the ability to produce large quantities quickly, it will be phased because we don't have unlimited amount of vaccine right away. And so there have been committees at the CDC have been looking at how to deliver it and who would be the first people. So the decision that seems to be evolving and probably will be adapted by states would be the first people to get the vaccine would be those that are frontline healthcare providers. So people, health in hospitals and other healthcare facilities who are caring for patients are the highest risk to get COVID and are also the most needed to continue to care for people with COVID. So they'll be first in line, essentially. And then at the same time, I think nursing homes, residents of nursing home, as well as their providers in nursing homes would be also in that first group. Following that will be high-risk groups based on age above 65 and those with comorbidities underlying like diabetes and obesity and so on. So it will go down in a graded fashion in that way.
All right, thank you. Now, this was very informative. I'm sure our viewers will benefit a lot from this. Now, if our viewers have any questions about the COVID-19 vaccine, what should they do? Who should they contact? Is it their friend, neighbor, or someone else?
Yeah. So what will happen, I think, is as the vaccine becomes available, the state health departments will be where the delivery would occur from. And the initial vaccinations, of course, will be through hospitals and the nursing homes because of, and also doctors' offices will be getting some vaccines, but I think it will be limited in the beginning. But for the general population, I think I would say that the delivery for the general population is probably going to happen from CVS and Walgreens and outlets like that, which already vaccinate for flu vaccines and other vaccines. So you know how you could go to your CVS and get your flu vaccine. It might be something similar to that. And certainly your doctor, would know to direct you where to go. So I would say those would be the best places. Also, the federally qualified clinics will be vaccinating. So one of the, what we didn't talk about, one of the challenges is that the first two vaccines that are coming out, the Moderna vaccine as well as the Pfizer vaccine, have very stringent requirements of storage. So the vaccine, for example, the Pfizer vaccine has to be stored at -70, which is like a deep, deep freeze. And well, not hospitals, most doctors' offices don't have those types of
Right.
freezers. They are large and take a lot of space and maintenance and expensive. So, because of that barrier, a lot of this delivery of this vaccine will be through institutions like hospitals that have something like that, or universities, places, university clinics will be able to do it. But CVS will be able to do it, and Walgreens are gearing up to do all of these vaccinations, and they will have those types of freezers that are needed.
Thank you, Professor Gaur. That was very informative. I'm sure our viewers will appreciate that. Thank you. And a big thank you to our viewers. We hope you enjoyed today's show and will benefit from it. We hope to be back soon with you. Till then, goodbye and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.